again. Swinging through the city so fast you can barely notice them. Wild problems. Living on the edge, body grind, spinning web, swinging from the highest ledge. Superpower science kid, you don't think it's fair? I got the world's smallest.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
And out of Queens, NYC, and I do it even.
Hell of an intro. Hell of an intro. How great is that?
Go, Marc. Awesome.
Yeah. And also the dichotomy of Spider-Man theme songs are just like,
yeah.
There's not one bad Spider-Man theme song.
Yeah.
There. So
true.
But yeah, welcome everybody to Animation Fascination, episode 130. With me, as per usual, as always, is Mr. Stanford Clark, somewhere on screen or in your ear holes if you're just listening. And then today we have Mr. Hector Navarro as a very special guest from Heroes Reforged. Welcome, Hector.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the invite. That was great.
Yeah. I figured talking about Spider-Man, we needed somebody that is a big Marvel zombie, and not to be confused with Marvel Zombies that comes out later this year.
Right.
Yeah. And, my goodness. I mean, my mind's been blown knowing that, Marc, you were able to make this connection with Hector. Hector, I can't think of anybody else I'd rather talk, about Spider-Man than with you. So anyway,
that's so nice.
Thank you.
Of course. I'm happy to. It's very cool when people think of you that way. I think that's a really great byproduct of the stuff that I've done on the internet over the past decade. And I really appreciate it. And I take that responsibility not lightly. It is a great power and a great responsibility for me. So thank you, guys.
With great power comes great respect.
No, responsibility, Marc. It's responsibility.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess, like, speaking of that too, I thought it might be a cool idea to see like where everyone's origin story is as far as like how they came to Spider-Man. So you can go with you first, Hector.
Sure, that's a great question. That's a great question.
And then you, Stanford, and then I'll go last.
Sounds good. I think it was the 90s cartoon show, Spider-Man, which then kind of is parentheses, the animated series, the same way Batman, the animated series is called that, from 1994, I think. And I think it was really flashy and cool. And I think I liked it more than X-Men at the time because X-Men was kind of really lore heavy. You couldn't really jump into, like, I would watch an X-Men thing and it would be like part 4 of 7. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what the hell's going on. Even as a 5-year-old or whatever, I didn't know what was going on. But I think you appreciate that stuff more when you get older. But Spider-Man for me was really great, a great entry level for the characters. The first couple seasons are like, this is the Lizard episode. This is his origin. This is the Mysterio episode, And then it was also really smart to turn me into a Marvel zombie because they did this on purpose. It was the show that would have Spider-Man team up with a different Marvel hero character. And that's how I learned that he knew Daredevil and the Fantastic Four and Doctor Strange and Blade and all these characters. So that a couple years after that, when there was trailers for a vampire movie called Blade, and I was 11 or something, I told my dad, I'm like, I want to go see that. He knows Spider-Man. And so my dad took me to see Rated R Blade when I was 11 years old.
Oh, excellent.
In 1998. And that movie's awesome. And that kind of did start, that kind of prepped me for, again, this is kind of pre-internet days. So my research and its research and understanding and awareness of Marvel came from that show, came from a couple years after that, X-Men Evolution. But it was also me going to the library and finding like a reference book, Marvel 5 Fabulous Decades of the World's Best Superhero Stories or something by Les Daniels. And that book was like teaching me the history of Marvel Comics so that I knew who Stan Lee was. So that for the series finale of Spider-Man, the animated series of the 90s, when Stan Lee shows up, I was like, I know who he is. And I'm so excited about this. This is so cool. And then he's popping up in all the movies. But all that stuff got me prepped for the 2000s and beyond, where they would get the live action treatment, So, but my introductory sort of exposure to Spider-Man was that. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, 2 different big comic book things were happening, which was J. Michael Straczynski writing regular, like, adult Spider-Man when he was, like, a 28-year-old, but he was a substitute science teacher
Yeah.
at Midtown High, and it, like, blew my mind. I thought it was amazing. It was like the introduction of Morlun and the sort of, the spider totem and the early, kind of Spider-Verse-y stuff, kind of.
Yeah.
And then at the same time in the year 2000, they did Ultimate Spider-Man in the comics, which was that sort of fresh start where I was reading it and I was like, "Oh, this is the origin of Peter Parker if it were done today." Because it was also difficult to get those early 60s comics back in the 90s. They
Oh,
had
yeah.
some reprints of like hardcover, super pricey, like those like Treasury edition or whatever it was that they called them, the Marvel Treasury and stuff. Really nice, but like hard to find that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you go and look for old comics, you could maybe find a reprint of an old 60s issue, somewhere in there. It was just hard to kind of jump in at the beginning and get everything in a row. But Ultimate Spider-Man provided that fresh, modern origin story and then each of the villains. And I attribute that to the writer artist combo. I mean, Mark Bagley was an amazing artist, and Brian Michael Bendis did such an amazing job making that stuff feel cinematic even before the Spider-Man movie. And it's the same reason I also love the J. Michael Straczynski stuff was artist John Romita Jr. I loved his art. He's still one of my favorites. So that became my Spider-Man school, coupled with my knowledge from the animated show. And then I just, from there, I was like, I'm all the way in and kind of, with the advent of the internet and things getting easier, I think it became easier to fill in the knowledge or the awareness or whatever and like read old stories and stuff. So that was my Spider-Man introduction. What about you, Stanford?
So, I've earned my gray hairs. I'm a geriatric. I'm an old dude. I grew up with these things called newspapers. I don't know if any of you might remember. And my introduction to Spider-Man was in the daily comics, which I would read voraciously, every day in the newspaper. And there was this great Spider-Man comic that was just one of my favorites as a kid. And so I think that's what really started it. And then honestly, I read some Spider-Man comics, but I think what really rekindled my love is just because my big passion movies was the 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, which
Absolutely
literally just blew my mind because I just feel like that's just the Spider-Man that I pictured in my head. I mean, I love the animated shows, but it made me actually see that. I thought the CGI was so good. They just captured, I just really loved everything about that film, and so probably those two things were probably the most kind of foundational things for me for Spider-Man.
Nice. For me, it's pretty similar to you, Hector. Is that like my intro to it was the '90s Spider-Man with Prince Eric from Little Mermaid as the voice of.
That's right, he was the voice.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Which when I figured that out, like later on, I guess not figured out, but like discovered that later on, I was like, what? Peter Parker is Prince Eric? Yeah. Like I feel like most of the lore that I learned from Spider-Man early on was like all of that 90s Spider-Man animated series. Like you said, Hector, like X-Men kind of did that too, where they had like 7 or 8 part like episodes of like like the Phoenix Saga and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man kind of did that too, but it wasn't like 9 parts. It was like maybe like a 3-part arc or something like that.
Yeah.
But they did like a lot of the stuff on that like they've now done in the movie. Like they did a whole like Spider-Verse basically thing in like the last season of that show.
Yeah.
So like
they did Secret Wars. They did a ton of stuff that are these big. They did the Clone Saga. So yeah, they touched upon I think the major Spider-Man stories up to that point, and I think that cartoon, along with Batman the Animated Series, along with like the Justice League cartoon that would come out in 2000, I think those kinds and the X-Men cartoon, I think those shows really. We're talking about foundational. They kind of set the bar for what like the movies and especially Marvel Studios would try to do.
Absolutely.
I don't know how directly influenced they were, but I have to imagine when we're talking about writers and directors and producers and people coming on that may or may not have grown up with that stuff, but they're I'm sure like Kevin Feige watched episodes of Justice League. You know what I mean? I'm sure he watched Batman the Animated Series and
Yes.
Spider-Man and all that stuff. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, that stuff was really well done. Really, it did a great job of taking those comic book storylines and concepts where sometimes were really out there and making it very accessible. And that's the key to making a great adaptation of this stuff, I think. Make it accessible.
Yeah. I mean, like with that at that point too, I remember I had a bunch of like the action figures too. There's like some super flexible Spider-Man that I had that I would play with like all the time when I was little. And I remember there was like one thing where I was playing with one day and I threw it in the air just because I was like pretending to use web-slinging, but then I didn't catch it because I don't have spider reflexes, and it landed on the ground and it's like torso shattered into a million pieces.
No.
And I was
Oh, Mark.
and then
Dramatic.
insert all of the Spider-Man crying images right here.
Oh no.
But yeah, like
have you healed your inner child? Have you healed have you went and got that action figure? Because I'm pretty sure I can find it on eBay right now. It's a superposable Toy Biz Spider-Man 1994. Have you gotten another copy of it? Another version of it?
Well,
Mark,
Christmas.
You're
we got to look.
There you go.
We got to make these right, buddy.
That is why I'm in therapy. So I mean, that is
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, between that, like I got Spider-Man on me all the time.
Wow.
Yeah,
and then
you got a cool tat, Mark, with Spidey. Yeah.
But yeah, like Stanford said too, like also just like the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi films, the specifically Spider-Man 2 was like very influential to me, like when that came out, like around the time that it did too. Like last year they did the Spider Monday. I went to every single week of that.
I did too.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
I really loved it.
Which was an awesome experience to bring my son to the specifically the Raimi Maguire trilogy, because he had never seen those in theaters. Because he was like maybe 3 when Spider-Man 3 came out. So
yeah,
it was an awesome experience to be able to do that. But
absolutely.
I mean, and then I've just always loved Spider-Man since. Spectacular Spider-Man was amazing. Earth's Mightiest Heroes for the Avengers animated series they had a little tiny bit of a Spider-Man clip in there. That was pretty good.
Yep.
And I actually like that MTV CG Spider-Man. Yeah. I like how it was kind of sort of like it's very similar to this almost, in that it was technically the Raimi Maguire,
but it was adjacent. It wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
adjacent.
Perfect.
That'll bring a good segue to us talking about this, which this is like MCU adjacent Spider-Man. Now, when the show initially got announced, it was Spider-Man freshman year, and I think originally it was going to be more like actually this this is what Tom Holland's Spider-Man was doing before he went and fought in Civil War, and then I guess not surprisingly they're like, oh, that's going to kind of tie our hands for like what we can do in the show, if that's like all we're giving ourselves. So I'm glad they ended up switching their initial idea for this and just making it's still being like adjacent to it, but kind of before we kind of break it down more, what was your two, like your overall thoughts of how this first season went? If there's like surprises in there that maybe you didn't expect to come up, or was there stuff that you were happy to see in there, or whatever else has kind of stood out to you that you weren't maybe thinking that you were going to see when you were watching it?
My takeaway, I'll jump in first if that's okay, Stanford.
Please. No, I was hoping that you would.
Okay, great.
So yeah, you're good.
Don't mean to step on any toes.
No, never.
My takeaway, my impression is that I think that the show, well, first of all, I really enjoyed watching it, and I think it ended very strongly. And I think there were surprises, like you mentioned, Mark, that kind of popped up throughout the season. I really like the way that they tied in this fun little time travel loop to the first episode. I thought that was really clever because episode or two before the finale, it was like, oh, Osborn's trying to recreate, the spider blood, the way that Peter gets his powers. And I thought that was really cool. And then as soon as Doctor Strange showed up, I went, oh, I think I know. Yep, this is what they're doing. This is very clever. The spider doesn't come from another dimension. It's, homegrown. So it's this great little loop. But anyway, those kinds of things were really fun and surprising. And I also liked seeing how, it's always fun with any kind of a what if storyline. The point is, the fun thing about it is how you're going to see it, how different it is, right? That's the whole premise, the whole idea behind a what if storyline, an alternate universe, an alternate reality. How are things different from what we may be already familiar with? So I think those moments were really enjoyable. Things like, hey, what if instead of Tony Stark, it is Norman Osborn? Whoa, that's an entirely new direction that you can take this character in. And I think that the show mostly pulls everything off, everything that they try to set up to do. I think my overall feelings with it too are that I do wish that the visuals were different and stronger in some places. And I know that that is most likely due to budgetary reasons, but I kept thinking while watching it, I don't want this to be the most expensive show in the world. But this show doesn't have Tom Holland or Marissa Tomei or, any of these voice actors from the movies that are probably going to fetch bigger paychecks than like a voice match or a voice actor or whatever. And I also think that if this is coming from Disney proper, right? This is Disney. They invented animation. And this is your sort of chance to kind of show off and go, okay, Sony, okay, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you did your thing with your couple movies and your couple little shorts here and there, but we're going to bring it back to that comic book style, that Steve Ditko art, or, that kind of, which I think is such a smart visual direction. I think that the design of the characters is amazing. And I think that like flipping through an art of book for this show is going to be fantastic. I love seeing I didn't get to be there in person, but my pal Adam from Heroes Reforged was there, seeing the sort of like first looks at like the character turnarounds and the character designs at Comic-Con when they had a panel showing it off. I think all that stuff is great, but I miss that the show is CG animated versus hand drawn. And I know that this is the world we live in. I know that it's budgetary stuff, but then I see like the CG animation of the characters and their expressions and how they move and stuff. And I go, it's an unfair comparison. But when you look at something like Arcane, which is also CG characters, not hand-drawn characters, the expression in that show, the acting of those characters is like beyond. It is incredible. But I know that show, it's 2 seasons, has a budget of like $250 million. Like, I don't know how expensive that show Arcane is. It's probably astronomical. I get it. But is there a world where, for me, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man could have been hand-drawn with those same character designs, with the backgrounds and the vehicles still being CG, with those kinds of elements that I think are much easier and manageable to do in computer animation, but to still have that Disney budget, that Disney animation style, the hand-drawn animation style, to kind of bring that comic book look to life. I mean, I think that when you think about the idea of like, okay, a comic book or artist or a comic book art style brought to life in an animated form, I still think that the gold standard is Spider-Verse. I think that going from the comic book visual language to that CG world is so amazing. And I know that like Warner Brothers Studios has been trying to do different sort of, the example I always think about is like for years and years and years, and they're still doing them. Warner Brothers does the DC superhero like direct to video or direct to streaming movies, right? They did like the Tomorrowverse, and they ended with Crisis on Infinite Earths 3-parter recently, and they're going to keep making those. And and they occasionally do them inspired by like a specific comic book thing, right? Superman Red Sun or Gotham by Gaslight, and they're trying to be inspired by that art. And I remember for years, fans would ask, are you guys going to do Kingdom Come? And people like Bruce Timm or whoever was producing those movies would always kind of answer with like, we're trying to figure out how to do that in animation. You know what I mean? Because when you think about Kingdom Come, you think about the Alex Ross artwork. It is watercolor, it's painted, and it's realistic. And it's the most mind-blowing when you're used to typical comic book art. comic book art that I love, and then you see something like the Alex Ross, oh, this is on a different level. This is really like painstaking, takes time. And so people at Warner Brothers were always like, we're trying to figure out how to do that. And I don't think there's a way to do that unless it's like very, very expensive, unless it's a kind of, I'm sure you guys are thinking right now, the animation fans and experts that you are, like, what comes close to kind of a watercolory, it's very, very difficult to do with that level of detail and that level of like rendering and stuff. So then I think back to Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and I go, the basics are there, the design is there, the simplified comic book art style is there, which you need to have fluid animation. But there were still times in the show where like the characters were a little too robotronic, right? A little too robotic, that it wouldn't take me out of the story. I think that the strength of this show is the story and are the scripts and the interactions between the characters. But I remember I just thinking as a Spider-Man fan, I'm like, oh, I wish that this was like top of the line, top tier. I wish Disney let them put more money into this, but it's a different world we live in. So overall, though, my takeaway is very, very happy with this first season. Is it my favorite Spider-Man show? Does it dethrone Spectacular Spider-Man? I don't think so. Not yet. But there's a lot of potential in this show, and especially with where things left off, the fact that they tease like they're going to maybe do the Clone Saga or some version of the Clone Saga. It's crazy. It's wild. And I am excited to see these animators and writers and producers and stuff like take it into a new direction, and hopefully, given more money in season 2, hopefully they can pull off some really cool and exciting stuff. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Stanford, over to you. Stanford.
Oh, see,
and it already got renewed for season 3 too. So
did Spider-Man?
Oh, did it?
I'm glad.
Okay, okay, that's true.
Great.
I do remember reading that.
Great.
I really appreciate your comments, Hector. I think probably the thing I've liked the most is the character design. I think that was a winner. But I'm with you. I just feel like I don't think it's necessarily fair to call it that they cheaped out, but I think they kind of cheaped out on the animation. It almost reminded me of some of the like the Hanna-Barbera ones of my youth that I love, but just again, so I thought it looked great as far as again just with the characters, but just wishing and occasionally I think sometimes they would let it go and spend some money on again some of the flying scenes and whatnot. When Spidey's going through the city, which again I love. That's something that I really love.
Mm-hmm.
But I also felt it was in a lot of ways very corporate in that. I mean, when they rolled out web in it, I'm like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Spidey attraction at Disneyland, but it's like, I don't know that it didn't make me mad, but it just felt like, well, okay, I guess maybe they were like trying to do a lot, and then kind of the MCU adjacent stuff that Hector so eloquently discussed. I thought that though. I feel like this is a really good foundation. I'm so glad that they're going to be at least 2 more seasons because now that things are really going. I think some of the episodes maybe were a little slower, but then that happens. I think with episodic television, right? I mean, it's just, and I appreciated that there were a lot. They introduced a lot of characters. They've got a lot of storylines going on.
Yeah,
some of them I thought were more interesting than others. And I know we'll probably get into some of that, but overall. I had a lot of fun, and I thought it ended, in a very
really
strong way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Kind of
over to you, Mark.
To piggyback off like what you two said too is the thing that surprised me as far as what they did with the storytelling in this first season, and I know it's just going to hurt even more as they continue this was the kind of the dichotomy of the hero story for Peter. And then the fall story for Lonnie at the same time. So like, and it's gonna hurt really bad even more like in season 2 because I think that's going to be like where like the Lonnie fall like really keeps going into Tombstone territory there. But I just liked like it felt like basically that Peter and Lonnie were basically like co-leads of this season, because you're following along with Lonnie
Totally.
as like
Yeah.
he's making some of the decisions for the right reasons.
Yes.
Like to like like protect his brother and whatnot. He does still make some bad decisions, obviously. But I like there's between like the team up there with like Spidey like near the end of the season. He kind of has his origin there with the gas that effectively gives him his indestructible skin there,
Right.
and we
Right.
kind of see him start. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly what the disease is called, but like like where some people's skin is kind of like patchy in like different areas, but it's like
Yep.
almost like that's kind of happening, but like with turning his skin gray.
Mhm.
There, so it'll be interesting to follow along with that as that continues to move the way that it is. But I also liked in the MCU films we have Ned and MJ in there as Peter's kind of trio, and then
Yeah.
in this it was kind of Lonnie was kind of the there at the beginning, like, but then we get Harry basically as, I don't remember what he called it, but it's like he's essentially the Ned, the guy I think he said the guy at the desk instead of the guy
Yeah.
in the chair.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I liked that little spin on that. And then we have Nico basically not as like a lumpetrist, but basically Nico and Harry are both kind of Ned in this show.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which I enjoyed. And then Pearl is kind of like an MJ Gwen, which, spoilers, I guess, if people don't follow, Jeff Trammell, who's the showrunner,
I saw that.
posted, he's like posted that Gwen is going to be in season 2, and apparently also Spider Gwen. So
Yeah,
or
it's crazy.
or Spider Ghost, depending on what they call her.
Yeah. What they're gonna call her.
Yeah, which I know some people when they saw that were already jumping, were like, can't we just let Peter be the only like Spider character in the show? And not, I was like, we don't know like how Spider Gwen's gonna be in it. We already know there's time travel involved in some aspect or ratio, or there
Right.
could be a Spider-Verse thing going on in this.
Right.
You don't know how it's gonna be.
Mhm.
All I responded to it when I saw that was like, oh snap.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
But yeah, but I don't know. I like you talked about with Norman. I liked that kind of spin on the billionaire.
Yeah, I did too. I thought that was an
mentor.
interesting twist. Yeah.
But you can see like how Tony actually was like a good mentor for Peter to have, where Norman Osborn not so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just liked, I don't know, man, there's a lot to love about this season too. I enjoyed how, like, you guys were talking about the animation a bit, where that I guess lacked in some cases. I thought the story was done really well.
Yeah.
That flowed throughout. It weaves in things that are, it doesn't feel like it's setting stuff up, even though it is setting stuff up. Like it feels like fluid and natural to it. Doesn't feel like jammed and forced in there. I like how we see what's his name, Clev, in there again too, from
Oh yeah.
from Shang-Chi,
Do a flip.
and yeah,
Yeah.
which
Great.
that led me to think today, because I've been watching Severance a lot lately. I was like, oh damn, there's 3 people from Severance that are in Spider-Man films, because you got Adam Scott and Madam Web. Yeah, Clev.
That's
there.
right.
And then the Tinkerer is
That's right. He's in Severance too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man,
Good pull. Good pull.
all
Go,
the
Marc. Yeah.
Spider Severance.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I one of the things I like a lot about these shows too is sometimes when we do get to see the interactivity with other superhero characters.
Yes,
So I liked
absolutely.
in this, like you brought up Daredevil earlier in the 90s animated series, and that's kind of where I first got acclimated to Daredevil at that point and became a big Daredevil fan. And everybody loves Charlie Cox's Daredevil, and I like that Charlie Cox came in here, you're talking about like we didn't get some of the people to do their
I
voices
know.
for stuff, but got
I know.
Coleman Domingo is Norman. Coleman Domingo does amazing as Norman.
Yes.
But which I don't want to understate that, but I loved Charlie Cox's episode in here, and they had the little like lighter motif of the Daredevil theme during that
Great.
scene, and I was like, I really want to see Tom Holland and Charlie Cox
I know.
in a live action Spider-Man movie meet up. I mean,
know.
I know that they have.
I
but
was thinking this.
I
I was
want
thinking
Spider-Man
the
and
same
Daredevil
thing
to
too.
meet
Yeah.
up. I know that Peter Parker and and Matthew Murdock have. You know what? And then I want them to fight Kingpin together.
Yeah. And I think that was a great highlight of the season 2, because like Stanford was saying, you could tell some animation was really great. And I think it was because they were clearly prioritizing what they needed to prioritize. And I think that Spider-Man Daredevil fight on the rooftop is pretty great. Like the choreography is great, right?
Yeah,
The camera movement's very dynamic. It's really, really exciting. My only, I guess, note for that one would be in some of that vocal performance, Charlie Cox sometimes as Daredevil would say a line that I'm like, maybe he didn't know that he was going to be like doing a move while saying it, because he was a little sort of normal, like if he was standing and talking versus kind of, doing the kind of that kind of movement while delivering the line. You don't understand, like Norman Osborn's hiding something, that kind of thing. But but other than that, I think that it was one of the more like successful sequences and moments of the show.
Yeah.
And and even though I do have a bit of like mixed feelings where I'm like, okay, you got Charlie. That's awesome. And in a perfect world, you guys would have gotten Benedict Cumberbatch for Doctor Strange and Marissa, the whole MCU thing, but that's not what this show is. But it's still fun to know that at least in 2 universes, Charlie Cox is Daredevil. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And maybe if we see other universes, maybe there'll be a, whatever the case may be. I do hope that Charlie's able to like kind of be connected to this character for as long as he wants to be and as long as they want him to be, because I think he's definitely earned it. So yeah, that was really great. Yeah, it's like imagine a world where like some show like this would come out, and this would be crazy too, because this would never happen, but like Harrison Ford would voice General Ross like the week before the movie Captain America Brave New World. If they could time it out like that, that would be amazing. Yeah. But truly kudos to everybody on the voice cast, whether they were sort of doing a voice match. Like I know Mick Wingert is a long time Iron Man voice, and he kind of has that RDJ flavor, but he still knows how to make Iron Man his own. But even if it's a completely sort of new character, like the actors that were playing like Big Donovan or Lonnie or, Harry Osborn, or like you mentioned, Coleman Domingo, I think everybody did such a great job with these roles that really endears us to these characters. Like Nico did a great job with that performance. And so, yeah, I'm very happy for everybody that they cast. And I think they all did a great job. But yes, there is a little piece of me that's like, oh, in a perfect world, it would be all the movie people. But again,
I agree.
Unfair. It's unfair. It's unfair. Yeah.
But hey, but still, I agree. Yeah, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We did have some holdovers from What If, like Peter is the same kid that did Peter in the Marvel Zombies episode of season 1 of What If.
Okay, cool.
It sounded like Doctor Strange was the same.
Might be.
I wondered about that, Mark, but I didn't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
in any case, yeah.
You kind of said it earlier, but like this entire series is essentially a what if.
It is. Yes.
Preposition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it even has Uatu in there.
Yeah, I mean, but he's all over the place. It's he was spying on Groot in the I Am Groot shorts. It's like the guy is like a peeping Tom. He's everywhere. It doesn't mean it used to mean something when Uatu would show up and it's like, oh, there's going to be some thing of cosmic significance is about to happen. Or, in the comic books, he shows up right when they pass the Superhero Registration Act in the Civil War, like, oh, this is going to be massive. But I think now he just shows up. He's just watching the show. It's fine.
Yeah. He's a fan like us.
It's great. Yeah. It's great.
Because he did like in X-Men 97, he showed up just before everything
Genosha,
went down.
you're right.
Genosha, yeah.
You're right. Okay, so maybe he was doing his job there. But maybe here in Spider-Man, he's just like, I just
They're
like
just
it.
like,
I just
hey,
like checking
It's like,
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
just a fan of Peter. You know,
I'm just a
I
fan. I'm just here.
yeah,
You know, talking about how this show is sort of like an extended what if. One thing I like about the show, and one thing I hope that the show is still able to break free of, is kind of the same thing, which is for what if stories or for like alternate universe or whatever. I think another component for a successful version of that is to ultimately just make the normal universe look better by comparison. Meaning,
yeah,
oh, Superman Red Sun. What if Clark Kent landed in Russia instead of the United States and raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent, who are good people, who we know are good people? What if he were raised in Russia? What would, like, if the Earth was just rotated a little bit when his rocket landed? That's the premise for that comic book and the animated movie. And a lot of that stuff, it tends to naturally take on like a darker tone. Like a lot of the better what if episodes were like, what if Doctor Strange lost Christine Palmer and then he tried to keep going back and it's like it gets dark, because I
yeah,
think part of it is to ultimately show like the one universe that we follow, the main line Marvel Cinematic Universe, Sacred Timeline, Reality 616, Reality 19999, whatever you want to call it. But like the main thing, like how lucky we are to have these characters and how lucky we are that they were able to bring back everybody from the Thanos snap and it was a 1 in 16 million, and how lucky we are that we get to follow this universe and all the best stuff happens there and kind of the best versions of those characters happens there. Not that there isn't tragedy, whatever, but still it's like when you see something like you mentioned earlier, Mark, the fact that Norman Osborn, not a great mentor, just makes you as an audience member go, man, I'm really glad then that Tony Stark got to spend some time with Peter Parker and that they have a relationship. This show in a way
Yeah.
serves to like enhance that, so that the next time you rewatch those movies, you appreciate them more, or you
oh
think,
yeah,
man, it's really good that he didn't go down this other path. And at the same time, I hope that because this isn't just a one episode or a one special, it's a season and it's now 2 and now 3 seasons. I hope that the show is still able to grow out of that shadow and really kind of do its own thing and tell stories that we can look at and go, this is a great, unique story that only this show and this universe could tell. And
yep,
I'm really glad I got to watch it. And this is just enhances Spider-Man overall. And I'm really happy, again, kind of like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Like the Spider-Verse movies are not, to my dumb brain, like the definitive versions of those characters, but at the same time, they kind of are. When I think about an
Yeah.
adult Peter Parker, now I really think about that Jake Johnson Peter B. Parker that's really
yeah,
wormed its way in there. Or when I think about Spider Gwen, it's from those movies. Or when I think about Miles Morales, an amazing character, it's kind of from those movies. And yet, that's such a alternate universe, what if reality, multiverse thing. That's kind of the whole point of those movies as well. And they play with the fact that they're not quite the normal, you know, movie universe. They sort of play with some of the Tobey Maguire imagery and iconography that we
yeah,
know of. They've got Cliff Robertson's Uncle Ben is the Uncle Ben that we hear when it's like when he's talking to the blonde-haired Peter Parker at the beginning, the Chris Pine Peter Parker. So they're still there. I think they have an awareness of that. And Miles himself comes from a universe where it's like he knows he's not like the normal, prime Spider-Man character. He comes from a universe, and when he shows up and meets all these other Spider people in the sequel, he's like, "No, I'm gonna do my own thing," because all these other Spider-Men are like, "No, this is the way it's got to be," and they're all kind of talking about this prime. They're almost kind of talking about like the comics universe as being the thing that everything else springs from, which is really
yeah.
fun. The Ninja Turtles have done that. They've done animated specials where they talked about how like the
Oh yeah,
original black and white comics were like the prime universe, that everything sort of came from. Um, Deadpool did
speaking
the
of
same
Daredevil,
thing. What's that?
I was saying, speaking of Daredevil with Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtles, that's right.
Yeah,
Related to Daredevil, kind of. But like Deadpool did the same thing where in that movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, he goes and he talks to the other Deadpools at the end, and he's like, Prime Deadpool here. Like he said, he kind of, breaks the fourth wall. He kind of knows he's like the main one. If there is a main one, it's the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool in those movies. So yes, I'm I'm appreciative of when this story goes there to just circle back and make you think like, whoa, this is crazy. we're really lucky that Tony Stark went and got Peter before the Sokovia Accord battle or whatever. Like how the MCU in this world is going to play out is very interesting because Spider-Man wasn't there. And we're hearing these little things in the background about like, but then they chased down the fugitive, the Winter Soldier, and so
Yes.
if
Yeah.
if this is happening in the year 2016, which is supposed to be the year that Captain America Civil War happened, and the first Spider-Man movie happened in 2016, just a little bit after that, what's going to happen to this show 2 years from now when in 2018 Thanos attacks? That's like the next time we kind of see Peter in the movies, right? And he gets dusted. And by that point he's already either friendly or familiar with Tony Stark and the Avengers and, and Happy Hogan and stuff. So like, is he going to interact with those characters? Is this universe, the Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man universe, are they prepared for Thanos, or are they even going to get to that point in the story if it's 2 years from now? Or is each season going to be like, a couple of weeks of time of Peter's life, and then season 2 is like in the fall, and then season 3 is like in the winter? I have no idea, but it's very cool to think about how the timelines are going to be different, right? And what this show is going to be able to pull off or to reference, or like, it'd be crazy if Peter and May and others just got dusted at the end of like season 3,
I know.
right? And then like
Right.
just randomly, like not even that Peter's in space the way he normally was when he got dusted, but they're just like in the middle of something and they get dusted. And then season 4 is like they come back 5 years later. You know what I mean? And like they have to, I have no idea. It's really fun to think about what this show could do, do a 5-year time jump.
What are your hopes?
Or in this version, he doesn't get dusted.
But maybe May does. And like, you could do infinity different things. That's a great point, Mark. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you both, what are your hopes for the next couple seasons in the show? I know it's fun to speculate, right? So I guess we could talk about our hopes and dreams.
I would like to see them do a parallel version of Spider-Man Homecoming, which I don't think this show got to that point yet. Meaning, if this show was a little bit before Civil War and a little bit after Civil War, does that mean that in the fall, if Peter starts like a new year of school, that he'll meet Liz Toombs, who's the daughter of Adrian? Like, is Adrian Toombs still in play?
Yes.
I
Right.
would love, and then if he's in play, how does the presence of Norman Osborn, Otto Octavius, and the rest, like, how does that, mess with that? So I would really love to see them kind of redo that movie, but their version. And then going forward, like, because they've got Doc Ock and Green Goblin, which are such great characters, and I guess now they have like Venom symbiote, right? a little piece of, which is that's way down the line typically for a Spider-Man Peter Parker story. It'd be really fun to see them kind of go villain heavy. If they really are, like, if the point of this show was, hey, initially we were just going to do the MCU, but then we thought, we don't have access we can't do the Vulture because he hasn't met him yet. We can't do Mysterio because he's not going to meet him for years. We can't do so many different things that are sort of classic, typical Spider-Man, that they're like, let's just do it in our own universe, and that way we can do Norman Osborn and so on and so forth. Then go all out. Then do all the villains you can. Do some great villain storylines. Maybe I don't want to hear Oh Snap with Gwen Stacy and Green Goblin. Maybe not that, Mark, but there's, I would love to see the Dr. Connors that they set up in the show turn into the Lizard. I would love to see Doc Ock get more mixed up in, and I'm sure he's going to, sort of into that larger universe. That would be my hope.
They do their own Sinister Six.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
he already fought Scorpion, so they could have Max Dillon was on the web.
That's true.
Chalkboard there.
That's true. That's very true.
So,
yeah.
Good
That'd be
point.
great. That'd be really great. What about you guys? What kind of things would you like? I mean, you're obviously Spider-Man fans. What would you guys like to see going forward?
Go for it, Mark. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess that would be one of the things I'd like would be to see them do like a Sinister Six thing in the show, because I mean, they're already kind of setting up Norman to. They already have the glider. They'll probably, he's got he basically stole all that stuff Otto was making. So, and it seemed like there was like a pumpkin bomb kind of thing in there for one of the schematics. So it seems like it's only inevitable that in season 2 he's gonna be Green Goblin in that. So I think that would be cool. I don't know if they do it by the end of season 2, but I think that could be like a cool thing to do. Is like maybe a Sinister Six thing. I don't know who would be in that, because other than at this point, I think it like we kind of got introduced to Chameleon.
Yes.
Rhino
is there.
Yeah, Rhino is in there.
Or he could turn into the Rhino.
Yeah. There's like Shocker gauntlets that we saw in there too. Maybe we'll hear him yell Shocker.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
But that would be cool. And then maybe because the symbiote was there where Norman is, maybe they twist that too. Is they have a goblin symbiote thing to really kind of F with it and play
that
around
could be cool.
with it.
You know what I just realized as you said that, because that's such a cool idea. I'm like, how are there not action figures for this show? I don't understand the action figure world these days, where like they come out with something like this that's so seemingly meant to appeal to kids, right? I'm like, why is it that I haven't seen any of these in the toy aisles at the store? Right? I don't know.
They should be absolutely loaded with these, you know. But but there's nothing.
This Spidey is supposed to be. I don't know if that version of the ride still exists, but that Adventures Campus like e-ticket ride that was supposed to be like the multiverse ride, that art that they released that had this version of this animated Spider-Man in that art.
I think you're right.
Yeah, if you look that up, it's got like our Tom Holland Spider-Man right next to this Spider-Man, and it's still animated too, so it's like cool. I think that'd be cool to like integrate some. That's what I was most excited about for that ride too, because it would be like you know, Star Tours can be like, you know, whatever mix of stuff. They could do that with this ride, but like
did they have
you went to this multiverse instead?
Right? Did they have Werewolf by Night also in black and white, or was he in color? That kind of stuff is fun.
Oh yeah, and like Man Thing was in there too. Like if someone looks up that concept art, it basically had
3
or 4 different versions of the Hulk. It had She-Hulk on
there. What we're saying is there should be a Venomized Green Goblin action figure in time for season 2. That's a great idea, Mark. I agree.
Yes.
And then I would also like to see Coleman Domingo play a live action Norman Osborn.
Yeah, at this point, I'm in agreement with that too. I don't think every voice actor, I don't think every actor who plays a character in this, whether original or not, can kind of directly port over. I mean, we have some, frankly, adult voice actors kind of voicing teenagers and stuff, which is very common, and they're doing a great job. But yeah, dude, Coleman could do it. He could be Norman Osborn.
Yeah,
and I would love for that to happen. And I think that would be a great thing to introduce in Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland, and then maybe pay off into part 5, because I'm with Mark. I want Spider-Man 4 to be Spider-Man teaming up with Daredevil to take on the Kingpin. But I love the notion that Tom Holland Peter Parker had his Aunt May killed by Norman Osborn, who looks like Willem Dafoe, who's a white guy. And then he meets Coleman Domingo, and he's like this super amazing, charming, you know, really brilliant, like scientist, like, oh, whatever the context is, like, oh, this is great. Maybe he gets an internship or I don't know what it is. Or maybe this Coleman Domingo character is like building up his business. Because if you remember in Spider-Man No Way Home, Willem Dafoe was like, I went and looked for a Norman Osborn and I couldn't find, like, he couldn't, there was no famous established Norman Osborn yet.
Yeah.
So maybe he is like an Adrian Toomes. He's off the grid, or maybe he's like a Quentin Beck Mysterio, where he's kind of this failed scientist or whatever, failed businessman. But it'd be great if he would meet Osborn, maybe through meeting his son Harry first, who's just like a normal, unassuming, like maybe he's rich, maybe not, just this normal black kid who's his age. And he goes, oh, I'm going to make friends with this guy. So he makes friends with Harry first. Hey, let me introduce you to my dad. It's Coleman Domingo. Oh, this guy's really great. And then he goes, hi, I'm Norman. You can call me Norman. You can call me Mr. Osborn. And he freaks out. He goes, you killed my Aunt May. Like, that's what I want to see Peter go through, and have him deal with, like, but is he the same guy? Can I trust this guy?
Yeah.
You know, and then infinite stories can come from that. But Coleman's amazing. And at first, my pals on our YouTube channel said he's kind of doing a Willem Dafoe. And I was like, no, not really. Because I've seen Coleman Domingo in movies and I've heard him speak in interviews and stuff. I'm like, no, I think that's just his voice. But the more the episodes went on, I was
Yeah.
like, I think he's throwing a little bit of that in there, which is really
Yeah.
great.
I think I think so too. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder, just like, wow, is he kind of following Willem
Yeah.
Dafoe's
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great. That'd be
inflections
great.
or whatever? Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be so cool. Yes,
Did
yes,
we
and
talk,
yes.
Stanford? Did you mention what you would like to see in a future season of the show? Did we cover that?
Briefly, I would love, just as you're saying, like villains, and villains. Like all of the above. I would absolutely love that. I think it'll be interesting to see where they go with this possible love triangle.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nico
that's
and
just
Peter and Pearl.
teen stuff, which would just be, again, kind of fun, but also very, I think, very Spider-Man. With
Yep.
just who's he gonna go for? I'll be interested to see what happens with Lonnie. I think of any of the storylines, they spend a lot of time. I mean, it's like Mark had mentioned, with kind of these parallel stories.
Yeah.
And it was, again, we'll just see where it goes. Some of it I didn't find as interesting, but I know, but I also just feel like, okay, they're building a foundation, and I'm gonna, trust the writers and see where they take us with
Yeah.
it.
Villains do need a
We'll
good
see.
foundation to them so they can have that weight that sits on top of them.
Yeah.
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 and I agree. I also agree, Stanford, with Mark about like this co-lead of the show, and that I think they are very clearly trying to show the differences between Peter and maybe other young characters, other young men who have to make
Yeah.
similar decisions, and
Yeah.
sort of what Peter has in his back pocket. He's got his Uncle Ben, he's got Aunt May, and Lonnie. I think they did a really good job, especially early on, kind of setting up like, how could somebody who's so sort of smart and aware, and he's got a great head on his shoulders, like get
Yeah.
to this point. And I really like the moment where he gets home and he's having a tough time, but even spending time with his younger brother, who now his younger brother resents him
Yeah.
because his younger brother was like, I was trying to do my own thing. This was my thing. This was my group of friends. This was going to be my,
Yeah.
path. And you're going to be this superstar quarterback. And he has that pressure. Lonnie has that pressure, I think, from his family and from his parents and from school and his friends and everything. And the younger brother was so mad at him. And then that made Lonnie go, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Where are you going? I'm going anywhere where you're not. And I was like, that's so sad and relatable and kind of very brotherly. So what I would like to see is I think that Lonnie's story in this is similar to some of the storytelling choices in the show Invincible. Invincible does a great job showing us Mark with a K, not with a C, Mark, but Mark
Yeah.
Grayson, the superhero Invincible, like trying to do the right thing and like learning lessons and kind of failing and having to deal with his own sort of morals and his own value system and how that's going to change. And then that show Invincible will also show you some villainous characters, villains, and the decisions they make and how kind of screwed over they are. So that when they pop up and they interact with Invincible's life, you still sort of have sympathy for them and you go, it's not so black and white. Right. And I think that character Invincible kind of needs to recognize that. So another interesting moment earlier in this season, Spider-Man catches a woman who like broke into a pizza parlor and stole money. And he's sort of like,
great.
Yeah, he's sort of like, she's here. Could you not press charges? And she feels terrible. And she's like, I just lost my job, and we saw the help wanted sign in the window. And we're like, is this going to be very after school special? And is this guy just going to hire her? Like, and it didn't go that way, but it was still like the pizza guy was sort of like, yeah, I get it. It's fine kind of thing. And he had like tattoos and it made you wonder. I'm like, man, is that pizza guy? Did he go through some stuff? So it's there's a lot of layers there. And the hope is with season 2 that, because frankly, some of the stuff in Lonnie's storyline, it would get to a point where you're like, really, dude, you're hanging out? This is insane. Like he's on the phone with his mom and his friends are like opening up the crates and they're like, we got guns. And I'm like, that's crazy that he would hang out.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
Right. It's crazy. But to see the ending of that storyline where like he ends up finding the loyalty in that crew that he kind of doesn't have anywhere else. And, Big Donovan, Big D, like abandons them and he ends up taking place as the leader. That all kind of made sense for me. And again, he gets the superpower part of it. And, so he's going to become Tombstone. But I wonder if in this show, because again, this is kind of a what if, right? It's not the mainline MCU. It's not the Spider-Verse movies where Tombstone is a character in that first movie. He's just kind of a background guy. Like he's there. He's already full-blown Tombstone. He's working for Kingpin. But in season 2 or 3, can Peter find a way to help Lonnie so he doesn't go that route? Still, is there a way to bring that character back and maybe Lonnie will make a choice that will make us cheer and go, yes, dude, good. Yeah, finally. They could do that. They could do that as long as it, I think, fits with what they're trying to say with the story.
Yeah.
And the fun thing about Spider-Man and Marvel as a whole is that I think it's always easy to go back to the North Star of what the point of this stuff is. Gentlemen, I pose to you, if you try to distill Marvel to its essence or Spider-Man to its essence, what is that essence?
I have all sorts of answers for you, Hector, but I'm anxious to hear yours.
It's 9 words. It's a pretty famous phrase. It's just those 9 words. Less depending on the variation. With great power
comes great responsibility.
There must also come great responsibility. And I think this show so far has been kind of following that, and again, the main thing is Norman. When he flat out gives you the antithesis, we all went, no, that's not right. That's not right. We all squirmed. We're like, nope, this guy sucks. Don't listen to him.
Yeah.
Because the show's doing a good job of showcasing that. And I think season 2 and season 3, if they do stuff with the Lonnie character and he's Tombstone, as long as they're following with great power comes great responsibility, can he be turned back over to the light side of the Force? I think so. I think he can be a good guy, depending on what Peter and Lonnie's supporting cast kind of do in the coming seasons. But it's so sad, and some of it was silly, and some of it's also silly because it's like they were being real. They showed real moments. I think was really great in the first or second episode where Lonnie's just walking home and a cop pulls up, and it's like, this is very cool that this Disney animated show is showcasing this.
Yeah,
the perspective of what it is potentially like for a young black kid living in New York. But then at the same time, this show is only ever going to have like PG or PG-13 sort of violence. You know what I mean? But that dude did get stabbed by the Scorpion. Yeah. There were people that were like killed by the Scorpion. So, that thing where it almost feels like West Side Story, where it's like, we're going to have a gang fight and they're all just kind of punching each other. And I'm like, this would be way more intense if this was real or if this was a drama about this. But they took it there a little bit. So maybe they'll have a little bit more flexibility if there were any constraints with regards to that in season 2 and 3 to maybe make the sort of like the gang Lonnie stuff maybe a little bit more hard hitting. But then again, it is all sort of comic booky, and does it need to be that hard hitting? I don't know. Just as long as it's emotional and it's like emotionally truthful, I think it'll land. I think it'll be fine. But it was funny where it's like, we're meeting up with the Scorpions and we're the 1/10 or whatever. And I was like, you guys are just like fighting like it's a schoolyard where the show never didn't quite. Yeah, exactly. It didn't quite show like the brutality of it and the horror of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but the intensity of that
But you go back and read any Spider-Man comics of any era, they're not really going to do that. Spider-Man is supposed to be for younger viewers or readers or whatever. So like even when, I don't know if you guys have ever read the Spider-Man comic where like Harry Osborn was addicted to drugs. It's like the tamest thing you could read by today's standards. But back then it was like the comics code didn't approve, it was so groundbreaking. And it was just, it was just him being like, leave me alone, Peter. Like it was so after school special,
After school, yeah.
Oh yeah. And then like the famous one with the distinguished competition of like Green Arrow and
Speedy. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. On the cover. Yeah, man. They were in competition back in the 70s. They were really like, we're the more hard-hitting, colorful costume comic book for the kids,
Well, speaking of that, as we kind of wrap up and round out, there was a bunch of costumes in this season in the opening intro, but as far as also ones that Peter wore in the season, was there one that was specifically I guess it might be too easy. It's like, was there one that was your favorite outside of the costume?
At the end, right? I that's a good question. I think I liked I did like the three like slingers costumes in that one episode where it
Oh,
went
yeah.
from Prodigy to Dusk to or like Prodigy to Hornet to Dusk, whatever it was. I thought those were really fun. And I was hoping to see the fourth one was Ricochet, I think.
Yeah.
Surprised it didn't do, but you know, you get the bit. Rule of three. It's like, okay, it's gonna be a different costume, and then we get the kind of sleek black and white, either big time or future foundation version of the Spider-Man
Yeah.
costume, whatever
Yeah.
they were pulling from. So I like those three, and I wonder if, if they're doing Clone Saga, what if Osborn like puts some young impressionable Peter Parker clones in those costumes and sends them out as some sort of, that would be cool to see them
That'd be
revisited.
cool. Yeah.
Could be
Or-
fun. Could be
Or
fun.
the symbiote gets attached to one of those clones.
Oh, there you go. So that's
And
like this universe's version of Venom. Could be good. Could be
Yeah.
good. And creates the
Yeah.
spider. Yeah, that could be good.
I like the gag with the cape.
Yep.
Again, I was
Oh,
just thinking of Edna
Great.
I
Mode.
immediately just said no
Yeah.
capes.
No
Yep.
capes.
They're allowed to. It's Disney. It's their own thing. They're allowed
Right.
to reference their own thing.
Their
It's
own
totally
thing.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Richard Parker, as voiced by
Yeah.
Josh Keaton. We said Josh Keaton earlier for Spectacular
Yes.
Spider-Man. So
I love that it was Josh Keaton. I didn't recognize it until I saw the credits, and I thought that was brilliant. And it opens up a lot of questions. It opens up a lot of questions about where the story could go. I think famously the most recent or most famous Richard Parker stuff was from the Andrew Garfield movies.
Yeah.
Where
there's that deleted scene where
there's a deleted scene where he's still alive, and it was beautifully acted, but like you're watching, you're like, what is the point of this scene? Where are they going to go with this? And I don't know if it kind of reminds me of like there's recent Superman comics. I haven't read too many of them. Only saw a couple, maybe an issue or two or something, and I kind of looked at it where Superman learns that Jor-El is still alive, and he shows up, and there's a storyline there, right? So when that happened,
Wow.
I remember thinking this is interesting for like a story, but I don't know if I want it to become the kind of main going forward, like the thing that people typically associate with this character.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very important that Aunt May is the parent. I think it's very important that Uncle Ben dies, and that they were very, very influential on raising Peter. And in the same way that like I want Jonathan and Martha Kent to be the Superman parents, and I kind of want Alfred to be Bruce Wayne's parents, like I don't really I think that it's kind of very essential to those characters.
Yeah.
However, I said it earlier, this is a what if, like this, and this could go darker. And what does it mean if in this universe Richard Parker's alive and in jail? And me and my friends were asking the question, May knows this, but does Peter know? Or is Peter under the impression that Richard is dead? Because he said to Nico and Harry earlier, like, I'm an orphan,
Yeah.
but I'm, I got my aunt with me. So does he just say that to sort of avoid talking about a very sad thing, which is my dad's in jail? But my aunt has sort of told me and helped me, like, we don't talk about that, which is also really sad and real. And like young people have to kind of navigate that if their parents are incarcerated in the real world. Or is May keeping this secret from Peter, which is also devastating? Like, man, I think it's fun, good drama to explore. And I'm kind of glad it's happening here and not in the Tom Holland. If they do a Richard Parker in Spider-Man 4, I'm gonna be pissed. Like that sucks. I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Marissa Tomei was so good.
Either.
Yeah.
Although-
But here it's okay.
Here it's
if he was
interesting.
alive during that spell, he doesn't know who his son is then.
Mark, it doesn't mean there's so many differences between this universe and the MCU that it's more than just, I mean, it's fun to go back and I kind of did the same thing with like the Star Trek movies, the Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Kelvin timeline.
Yeah.
Those movies established like, oh, when Eric Bana came back in time and attacked and killed Chris Hemsworth, that was when the timeline split and diverged. But I'm like, I think you could even go back even further because there's so many little different cosmetic changes. Like in that universe, Captain Kirk's eyes are blue, whereas in the main, right? Whereas like William Shatner's eyes are hazel or brown. And I'm like, he was already in the womb when this divergence happened. So something must have happened earlier. I can get real nerdy with it. And I go, look, the real divergence happened in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, when they went back to the 1980s and introduced some technology that they shouldn't have introduced, clear aluminum or whatever it was. That's when the actual divergence happened. And now we're just catching up. Eric Bana visited that new universe. All I'm saying is, if in this universe, Norman Osborn has Oscorp and it's like this established in 2016, whereas in the year 2024 in the MCU, there was no Osborn up to that point. Otherwise, Willem Dafoe would have found it in his research or whatever, unless he was lying. I don't know. You could do whatever you want. But that's a major key difference that makes me go, if Richard Parker's alive in this universe, it does not mean he's alive in the other one, Mark. Doesn't mean that. There's so many divergences. There's so many differences. So, but it's fun to speculate about for sure.
Yeah. And maybe we'll get Chris Barnes as a flashback to voicing Peter Parker, or not Peter Parker, Ben.
Uncle
Ben.
Uncle Ben.
Yeah. Chris Barnes, the voice of Prince Eric from Little Mermaid, but also Peter Parker from the 90s Spider-Man show. I think that would be really great. I'm still on the train that I think Spider-Man 98 should happen. You know, kind of a sister show to X-Men 97.
X-Men,
like his little appearance in X-Men 97.
I'm like, I would still like, if not a season, maybe like an animated special, like an hour-long something. I think would be phenomenal.
It'd be so cool.
Marvel Animation wants to continue with this Spider-Man iteration instead, which is fine.
There's nothing saying they can't do the special presentations as
exactly
part of Marvel Animation.
Mark, that's a great idea to cast him as Uncle Ben. That is smart, dude.
Yeah,
that's really
I didn't
smart.
come up with that though. I think that was either Screen Crush or New Rockstars. It was one of
okay.
channels.
We'll give him credit.
So I'm not going.
I'm giving you guys credit for that. I'm giving Animation Fascination credit.
Oh, Mark.
Okay. All right. Well, so on that note, I think that's a good spot to wrap up. We're all looking forward to a season 2 and season 3 because those are definitely coming. So we don't know when. I think we already know that they're working on season 2 because we know that Gwen is going to be in there.
Right. Right.
Hector, if people don't know where to find you, or where would you tell people to find you online?
You can follow my stuff on YouTube at Heroes Reforged. If you search Heroes Reforged, there it is. Or you can go to that website, heroesreforged.com. Beautiful. Very nice. And I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky as Hector is Funny, I believe. So you can follow me there. Gentlemen, this was a blast. Thank you so much. Thanks for letting me completely hog the conversation, talking about one of my favorite things, Spider-Man. This was great. It was a real pleasure, really.
Thank you. And then if people want to find us, we're at animationfascination.net because some furniture place owned animationfascination.com. I don't know how that works.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, and we're also on Blue Sky and Instagram and all the places. But yeah, we want to thank Hector again for joining us.
Huge thank you to you, Hector.
Thank you, guys.
So much fun to talk to you about this.
Yeah, this was great.
Thwip.
That's right.
And we'll see everybody again next time on another episode of Animation Fascination. Bye, everybody.